Arizona's death row is 125 currently, and there have been 8 exonerations from Arizona's death row. And we're very fortunate this evening to have one such person to speak with us.
Police initiated this investigation under the assumption it had to be somebody that knew her, somebody that had a relationship with her. So they called in some of her co-workers. One of them co-workers mentioned my name. He said, "Well, you're dating her, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm not dating her. What is this about?" At which point he opened up his jacket, pulled out his badge, identified himself as a homicide detective from the Phoenix Police Department. Informed me of Kim's death. He said he was there to ask me a few questions. I got this search warrant. I looked at it and said, "You're going to take a blood sample, a hair sample, and a cast of your teeth." And I read it. It was signed by a judge, and at the bottom it said they had 3 hours to do this. So I cooperated. And took blood. I'm not sure he realized it was actually safe. And he bangs on the table and said, "Look, it's time to come clean, time to tell the truth. I know you did it. Why don't you just confess so we can all go home and get this over with?" I came up out of that seat. I told him what I thought of him, what I thought of the police department, the investigation. Why are you wasting my time? Go find the person who did this, and by the way, your 3 hours are up. He looked at me, looked at the watch, looked back and said, "Look, I'm not going to argue with you. There's other ways to handle this." All of a sudden I heard a screech of brakes, the sound of doors slamming. I looked over my shoulder. There was a van load of police officers, full riot gear, guns drawn, threw me on the ground and arrested me for murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. I'm not worried about it. I didn't do anything. You know what I was thinking about? Did I lock my car?
Groups were brought in for jury. I was called and questioning began. Religion, faith, family, location, time at the current job, etc. And how do you feel about the death penalty?
When we have a capital case, we can constitutionally select what's called a death qualified jury. These are people who, even if you're ambivalent about death, like I don't know if I could execute or not, you can be stricken from the jury. So you only end up with people who are willing to execute. And what the data suggests is those are also people who are more willing to convict.
Well, eventually I did get a court-appointed attorney. I felt good. I had a private attorney who was appointed by the courts to represent me. He was going to get paid $5,000 to represent me in a capital murder case. You can't even get a divorce for $5,000. He didn't do any investigation, didn't call any of the experts. That trial lasted just barely 4 days. And I got to find out, why they had me biting that styrofoam, why they took those casts of my teeth, because they did hire a bite mark expert, put that in quotation marks, a forensic odontologist, very impressive man, very well spoken, very powerful speaker even. He had a curriculum vitae, like 7 pages. He was the dean of the UNLV dental school. He was a state senator from Las Vegas, an elder in the Mormon church. It went on and on and on. Very impressive, very powerful. Later on, we found out he was also very well paid by the prosecutor. Over $50,000 he charged him for his work in my case. 10 times what I got to defend myself is what they hired this expert for.
After final instructions were given by the judge, we all sat down, discussed all the evidence, and came to the final conclusion. Guilty of first-degree murder. In just a few moments, the jury was released, and for me, life would be back to normal.
And shortly after which, I was called a cold-hearted monster, an unremorseful killer, and sentenced to death. For the next 3 years, I spent my life in a cell, besides most of y'all's bathroom system. I started going to the law library and stuff. And meanwhile, my case was making it through the Arizona Supreme Court. On that Friday, the prosecutor introduced a videotape made by this bite mark expert. My attorney was actually awake, paying attention at the time, and he objected to the admission of this tape. The judge said, I'm going to allow this evidence in. And then the burst of brilliance probably never again recreated my attorney's career. He actually asked for 30-day continuance. The judge said, denied. He said, we need to get this trial rolling. Now, this is just 7 months after they found Kim's body, and he says he has to get this trial rolling. Of course, when the Arizona Supreme Court reviewed this issue, they recognized it for what it was. It was a violation of rules of discovery. They're not supposed to spring an order last moment. They're not supposed to hide. And so they said the judge was wrong, and they actually overturned my conviction. But just because there is a mistake in error and omission doesn't mean you automatically get a new trial in the case. There's actually a second part to it called harmless error evaluation. This is where they will review that mistake, that error, determine whether or not it would affect the verdict. Did it matter? Would anybody have cared? Anybody being the jury, of course. And the Arizona Supreme Court's exact words were, without this videotape, there wasn't even a jury submissible case against Mr. Krone. They recognized this whole case was about a bite mark, that this was critical evidence, and that's when they ordered a new trial. And we realized we didn't want no lawyer from Arizona, that good old boy network down in Maricopa County. And my cousin had actually got involved. He was actually my mom's cousin. He'd heard about the case. One of my God, what kind of family excuse me, a relative that's a murderer, death row. I never met him before. He actually came to visit me. He'd been looking into my case. He knew this attorney out of California, and he was hired, retained. He said, "Let me take the case. Just pay the expenses." That trial started in February 1996. That trial lasted almost 7 weeks. Over 500 exhibits were introduced. 3 bite mark experts testified for the deep. And the truth was coming out because this man cared about what he did in his profession. He was going to do his very best. We originally had a little notebook, a binder full of police reports. And it would skip from like number 22 to 31, from 54 to 67. Where was these missing pages at? He had a petition to court to order the police to turn them over. We finally got them. Ended up with 2 notebooks full of police reports. The whole way up to like 160 something. They charged my family $700 a copy of these, they said. We asked for all the photographs of the crime scene. Originally, we had a stack maybe as big as 2 decks of cards. Wanted all the photos that they'd taken. Had to go through the judge. Eventually, they turned them over to us. Whole shoebox full of photographs. Charged my family $1,400. Copy of fees, they said. But the truth was coming out. During that time, we found out back in 1992, right shortly after my arrest, they had taken a swab. This was when DNA was just starting out. They had actually taken a swab off of her breast, where this bite mark was, and fiddled around with it in their own lab, and couldn't get any results that were worthwhile to them, so they sent it off to a DNA lab in Colorado. Identified as a saliva sample. That DNA did not match me. No way, no how was the saliva from the bite mark I'm supposed to make. No way could it be me. Prosecution denied he ever done it. Prosecution denied there was ever any DNA. My attorney was a very well-known DNA attorney out of California. He knew where to check around. And the laboratory said, yes, we have it. And the prosecution told the judge, well, there's not enough there to use. Well, by that time, my attorney also knew about a Dr. Blank out in California that could take the smallest amounts and recreate it up to it's big enough to test. And so we finally got our hands on that, did that testing, and of course that DNA excluded me completely. But I still didn't get it. I still didn't realize how important a death penalty case, a capital murder conviction is for a prosecutor. And I'll tell you how far this prosecutor was willing to go. He's the last one addressing that jury before they go out to deliberation. Noel Levy stood in front of that jury and said, don't let the defense mislead you. That's all they've been trying to do this whole trial. You can ignore that DNA. That DNA has no bearing whatsoever in this case. That's easy to explain. You're responsible to see that justice is done for Kim and her family. We know who committed this horrible murder. He's sitting right here in the courtroom. He said that DNA was just transferred there by accident off of somebody else's glass. The jury was out for 3.5 days. Came back and found him guilty again. And I look over to the prosecution, and they're jumping up and down, high-fiving like they just won a big ball game. Again, when it came time for mitigation, I told my attorney I got nothing to mitigate. He said, you let me handle this. For the next 2 hours, he went over all the pieces of evidence were introduced during that trial. The footprints in the kitchen where the murder weapon, a big butcher knife was taken from, a tile floor. Same footprints around, same tile floor around Kim's body in the men's bathroom where she was stabbed to death. All her clothes were cut off for her. Same footprints. They went out and bought the exact shoe to match these footprints. Size 9.5 Converse. I wear a size 11. My bare foot was bigger than the whole shoe. White palm prints in the sink where the murder weapon, the knife was actually washed and dried and put underneath the trash can liner. Fingerprints and palm prints all over those areas that did not match me. Hair on the body, DNA on the body did not match me. When he was done, the judge said that this case was going to haunt him for the rest of his life. It was hard for him to imagine someone like me actually committed this crime. He said he had lingering and residual doubt of my guilt. He said that was a mitigating factor that outweighed the aggravating factor, so he sentenced me to 25 to life instead of the murder. Finally, in 2001, Arizona State Legislature passed a new law. They recognized the importance, the validity of DNA. And you only have a certain window of opportunity to bring in new evidence, and after that, you can't ever bring it up again. And they realized that DNA should be an exception to that. They passed a new law saying if you had DNA evidence that was properly maintained, properly stored, that had direct bearing on innocence or guilt, that you could petition the court of your trial judge to do testing on that. We found out that they had the clothes that had been cut off the kid's body and been kept by the police department, was cut off and thrown in the court that man's bathroom. They had kept it preserved. My attorneys were able to look at it and determine that there was some kind of stains on her clothes, on her underwear, inside of her pants. And we petitioned the courts under that new law to get that DNA testing done. And there was a court hearing, the prosecution showed up, told the judge it was a wild goose chase, a fishing expedition, a waste of the court's time and money. Don't grant this motion, Your Honor. Crone's been convicted twice of a jury of his peers, overwhelming evidence of guilt. Your Honor, it's a waste of time. For whatever reason, that judge did order that DNA testing to be done. He went on to order the Phoenix Police Department's recently accredited DNA lab, the crime lab, to do that DNA testing. After all I've been through, the last people in the world I want to touch anything was the Phoenix Police Department. But again, it's funny and fortuitous things that have to happen in life for me to be reasoned, especially. But it was actually a blessing that the police department did that. Because when this lab technician extracted DNA from the pants and underwear, compared it was the same DNA, then compared it to me, and it wasn't my DNA, and compared it to the victim, Kim, and it wasn't Kim's DNA. I have to say, you go, girl, this overachiever decided on her own to plug it in the nationwide DNA data bank that only police departments had access to. A data bank that had DNA from all over the country. And when she put that in the data bank, it came back with a match. Came back with a match to a man that just 3 months after, it was currently, at that very moment, he was serving a 10-year sentence for having sexually assaulted a child just a few weeks, a month after the murder. A man who at the time of the murder was already on parole, probation for another offense he committed 4 years earlier, was paroled to his mom's house, whose address was just a few blocks from the bar in Phoenix, Arizona. My investigator went to talk to this man who was about to be released. He was an American Indian, he had a very bad history, a tough child, alcohol problems, drug use problems. He denied being at the bar, denied killing her at first. My investigator continued to question him. Eventually admitted he remembered being at the bar. He had a blackout, he said he remembered getting arguing something in the bathroom. He went on to say he remembered waking up with blood all over him. Oh, God, what happened here? Now, this was recorded by my investigator. It was called admission of guilt. He did not confess to doing it. He didn't say, yes, I did it, but it was a factual admission of the evidence. With that admission of guilt, the DNA evidence, my attorney, my investigator, went to the prosecutor's office and said, let Rick go. He said, here's the proof. You know what that prosecutor said? He ain't going anywhere. We know he did it. We got the bite mark evidence. He care one bit about the truth. Not one bit. Unfortunately for me, somebody was there in the city that did. A reporter for the Arizona Republic got a hold of the story. I had no idea how. The reporter for the Arizona Republic got a hold of the story and started doing investigating work. Just in a few days, next thing was front page, banner headline, top of the fold article about how recent DNA identified a known sexual predator as a murder case, and I was still serving life sentence for after being on death row for something I clearly didn't do. It's very impressive, very well written. It was truthful. It was honest. It's also embarrassing to the police and prosecution. That time I was on the yard in Yuma. I got a call over to the counselor's office, and the counselor said, your attorney's on the phone, and it was Alan Simpson in Phoenix. He said, Ray, how you doing today? I said, fine, just another day in paradise. And so he did, he laughed. He said, what are you hungry for? What are you talking about? Whatever's in the child. No, really, what do you want, Ray? You want steak, Mexican food, seafood, beer, what would you like? I said, Alan, what the devil are you talking about? So they just got off the phone with the prosecutor's office. They just got back from the judge's chambers. They're cutting paperwork. You're coming home today. Of course, my lawyer strode my knees. I said, what did you just say? He said, roll up, Ray, it's all over. You're coming home. 4 hours later, I walked out of that prison, looked over my shorts, and said, what are they up to now? They haven't tried this trick before. And I said, there's something different right here. Think about it. Maybe there's a reason I had to go through this. Because they can put me on death row, they can put anybody on death row. It could have killed me if it wasn't for a whole lot of good fortune. And so since then, I've traveled and spoke. I've been on a number of TV shows. I've been Good Morning America. I've been in numerous state capitals testifying. I've testified at D.C. I've been to both United Nations testifying. Telling my story, and now since my release, there's 143 total now. One is, whatever you see out there is wrong, whatever it is you believe in, it needs to be changed. Find the strength and unite with people of common faith and belief, and fight for change. I want to ask you in those times when you feel, why me, and you're so depressed, and you just don't know what to do, and you want to give up, and you want to quit. Remember my story, and the story of the other 142 men and women. And find the strength and the faith and believe that there's a reason you're going through this. It'll make you a better person. There's something you need to accomplish at the end. But I promise you, you will find the strength. You will be able to get through that. And it will be for the better. And with that, I say thank you all very much for being here.